Hey there, welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Come out and see us tonight, Community Beer, with Brian Kilmeade from Fox and Friends and our sister station, KLIF 570 AM. He's going to be out there from 6 to 8, doing a little presentation and then just hanging out casually, socially. I'll be there. Miss Parker will be there. Garrett over on the board will be there. Clayton and Sybil from the KLIF Morning Show will be there. I make no other promises besides that. Back to the headlines here. We're seeing some progress on some fronts, and we're seeing some things go backwards on other fronts. How will all this affect your money? You know, DOGE is cutting a whole lot. We have a spending bill that's on the table. Will it extend the tax cuts that are supposed to expire at the end of the year? Will it balance the budget so we don't have to print any more money and we can get a handle on inflation? It's coming at you from all kinds of angles. Here to make some sense of it, Spencer McGowan, Net Worth Radio, back on the James Show. Welcome back, Spencer.
Thank you, James. Glad to be here.
So I saw the tariff tit for tat is not done yet. More are on the way if things don't change. I imagine some things will change. Are you expecting, just generally speaking, tariffs to have a significant effect on the economy?
Well, the natural assumption is that it's going to cause inflation. Like today, you got the 25% tariffs on autos, pharmaceuticals, and semiconductors. And so every day seems to bring like new tariffs, right?
Right.
And Canada and Mexico looming. Now they reached an agreement last time, but I was getting deja vu on this because this is exactly like 2018-19. And the initial premise is it's going to cause inflation because stuff costs more, right? That's natural. Makes sense. What happened in 2018 and 19? So I went back and I remember doing these reports that the Dow's down 1,000, like today it's down 200, kind of corresponding to the auto, pharma, semi tariffs. Well, the Dow was up about 12% over that 2-year period. That was kind of anemic compared to, that was about average for 50 years. But anyway, I looked at inflation. All right, get ready. Because it was June of 2018, and the Dow would go down like 1,000 points, and they'd say trade wars and global recession and inflation. Well, inflation was 2.9% when the tariff started. Okay. Keep that number in mind, just below 3. Then all the tariffs were put on. Inflation went down to 1.5. Wow. So it didn't cause inflation in that period at the end of 2018, and it finished 2019 at about 2.3. below where the whole tariff thing had started. Now, go ahead.
Well, if you're caught off guard by some of the results from these policies, I think people are just too loose with the terms that they're using, because they use the term inflation, and what they mean is prices are going up. A lot of times when you and I are using the term inflation, or the Federal Reserve or other economists use the term inflation, they mean an increase in the money supply. So the spending power of your dollar is smaller. And that's sort of the technical definition of inflation. And they're not the same thing.
Well, there you go. Because you got spending cuts, which would naturally bring down inflation. You could take Argentina when Javier Milei with his chainsaw cut government spending by 30%.
He's a hero on the James Show, Milei. Yes.
And Javier made a big difference, cuts government spending by 30%. That caused a brief recession in 2024. It's minus 2.4. But he did deregulation along with it. Inflation came way down, and their GDP right now is growing at 5%. Their stock market is nearly double when he took office.
Yeah, so take notes, guys. Let's get that all done. And look, another thing about the tariffs is when people factor in, well, if the tariffs are going to go up and we buy all this stuff from China, then, you know, everything at the store is going to be 25% higher if you put a 25% tariff on all these things. It's like, no, we could source them from different areas. We could maybe, you know, get something that's 5% more expensive if we sourced it from India instead of China, or Malaysia instead of China, or Indonesia instead of China, or Vietnam instead. You know, there's all kinds of substitutions that happen. We could opt for a local something that's made locally instead. And even though it costs a little bit more, you know, it's still better for the economy in the long run. So I think a lot of people are just rushing to come up with bad headlines.
Javier actually had the solution, and it was massive deregulation. That's why the inflation rate came down. Well, with deregulation, you get more productivity. It's easier to make stuff. And when you have more stuff, prices either stay the same or go down. Well, productivity goes up with deregulation. How long? Well, DOGE hasn't really gotten to the big deregulation. It starts with getting rid of the, let's say, the bureaucrats that are pro-regulation, and they're doing that now. The next step will be starting to get rid of the 120,000 pages of federal regulation.
Amen. Well, from your mouth to God's ears, I hope. What are you talking about on Net Worth Radio, Spencer?
Well, you've laid the foundation for a for a happy exploration of the past and also Argentina. But I want to do Skid Row. Now, Skid Row consists of the EV makers. Tesla's the only one that seems to be able to make a profit. You had another bankruptcy on the EV front this week.
Nikolai?
Yep, Nicola. Yeah.
Is it Nikolai or Nicola?
I think it's Nicola.
All right. Well, don't listen to me.
No, it's okay. Lucid, of course, was prior. The yellow electric school buses, Proterra, that was the first one because they didn't work, especially in December. But Rivian's hanging on because Volkswagen made a deal with them. We'll see, but we're going to do a Skid Row. Everybody got excited, way overpaid for these companies, and then we'll explore who could make it and who may not.
I want to hear that because we did that on the James Show last year. There was Lordstown that went out of business. There was Smith Electric that went out of business. You've got a long list there. So it's McGown. I look forward to it, sir.
Thank you, James. Great show.
All right. Find him on Net Worth Radio, and he's also on our station on the weekends and our sister station, KLF. He's on there on the weekends as well. All right. Your thoughts on all this economic front? 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. We'll get into the latest on the DOGE back and forth in D.C. on the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there. Welcome to the James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. So DOGE goes in and they make a whole bunch of recommendations for cuts. Now, some of the stuff that is under the purview of the executive branch can just be paused by the power of the president. The Constitution is quite clear that he is the executive over the executive branch, and he has the first and final and last say over the goings on, the hirings, the firings, the spendings, the what have yous in the executive branch. So a lot of that can be stopped altogether. But if you really want to codify it into law and make cuts on some of these other programs that are out of the president's purview, some of that's going to have to be done through legislation. So what's really important is the legislation that is being debated right now for the next spending bill. We had the debt ceiling show off between the election and the inauguration. They kicked the can. That's supposed to come due sometime next month. And we're really going to see if it's going to go back to business as usual or if we really are going to get some significant spending cuts. Now, I do enjoy ending the global warming coloring book for Malaysia or wherever that's going. But that's not going to get us down to the $2 trillion in cuts that we need just to balance the budget. And that is my ultimate goal. Can we balance this budget? You know, because I would like to pay down the debt. I'd like to pay off the debt. I'd like to not run a deficit. But this all starts by balancing the budget. And then we get all kinds of other good side effects that we've been missing. You know, once we balance the budget, inflation crawls, if not completely stops. If we can balance the budget and keep growing the economy in the midst of a balanced budget, the purchasing power of the average man's salary actually increases. Prices actually go down. And I don't mean down compared to their inflated dollar cost. I mean nominally down, something that you rarely see in your lifetime outside of like big screen TVs and computers. So I know it's not sexy. I know it's not a fun topic, but I am focused like a laser in this House bill that just passed because this is where the rubber meets the road. I'm not sure if I like this. Now, it passed just yesterday with a vote of 217 to 215. There were a couple of Republican holdouts, and pretty much all the Republicans who voted for it, except for one, Thomas Massie. Now, you got to watch out for old Thomas Massie because A lot of people think he's just a jerk who says no to too much stuff, kind of like Ron Paul used to do. But Thomas Massie is the guy that I am probably most closely aligned with, philosophically speaking, in the House. So if he doesn't vote for it and all the other Republicans do, I go in this with an open mind thinking I probably wouldn't have voted for this either. Now, it's a massive reconciliation bill. And the number one thing that we're all worried about is, will it extend the 2017 tax cuts? Because that actually does affect you and me and pretty much everyone listening, everyone that files taxes, at least. This affects you because your standard deduction went up. And when they say, there's a tax cut just for millionaires and billionaires, BS. Anybody who had a tax liability got a cut. If your tax liability was already zero, you didn't get a cut because it's mathematically impossible for you to get a cut. So it's not really fair to say, well, the poorest among us didn't get any tax cuts, but the richest 1% did. Well, okay. Technically speaking, you're right, but you're totally misrepresenting that on purpose. But it does have the extensions in there. Now, they schedule that as a cost. That's going to cost $4.5 trillion over the next decade. Oh, stop it. It doesn't cost me anything if you stop taking money from me. I love how they score that. It's so dishonest. But it would also raise the debt ceiling by $4 trillion over 2 years. That's something that, nope, I'm not down with that. I don't like that. Over the next 10 years, it would add $3 trillion to the federal deficit over 10 years. Over 10 years, $3 trillion to the deficit, not the debt, the deficit. So this is not the cuts you're looking for. This does not put you even on a path to a balanced budget. I realize it's a long shot to say, well, can we get in there and balance the budget in the first year? I get it, that's a long shot, but can you cut the deficit in half? Can you have us on a path to where it will balance the budget in 2 or 3 or 4 years? No, it doesn't do any of that. And it doesn't rule out the biggest programs that are going to need cuts if this thing is going to ever balance. And that's Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I know it's not politically popular, and it must not be, because Trump said he's ruled out any cuts to Medicare or Social Security or Medicaid or any benefit that actually goes to a person. They'll cut waste, fraud, and abuse out of those systems. They'll quit sending checks and payments to dead people or doctors' offices that don't really exist. But this is not a serious budget. This is super disappointing. And if this passes, this is not going to be a big win for Republicans. This is going to be a big win for big government. I'm not even going to say the Democrats, just for all the bureaucracy and all the people that are banking on the entrenched overspending in D.C. For those of us who are hoping, the price of groceries would at least come to a screeching halt. They're never going to go down. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you that the groceries will ever be what they were in 2020. But can we at least tap the brakes on it? The Republicans aren't serious about it. Democrats never were serious about it. And Democrats, you should be out in the streets cheering this bill, because you love government, you love big government, you love all the entitlements. They're all saved in here. So what really are you griping about? You just don't want it to be perceived as a Trump win, even though you guys get to have D.C. just be a big, powerful Leviathan, as big as it ever was? Super disappointing. 800-288-9227. 800-288-9227. Coming up next, I'm going to talk to a woman that voted on it, probably give her a little bit of a hard time. Representative Beth Van Duyne will be next on The James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Well, hey there, all you beautiful Texans. Welcome back to The James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Let's go. All right, one of our favorite congressmen from the area, Beth Van Duyne, coming back on The James Show. Keep it going for Beth Van Duyne. Now, Beth.
Yes.
Did you vote? Did you vote for the House spending bill yesterday?
I did.
All right. From my point of view, I don't like it. It doesn't balance the budget. It doesn't put us on the path for a balanced budget. It doesn't eliminate big chunks of agencies. It doesn't get rid of the Department of Education and all kinds of other things I hope for. I did like the extension of the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, those tax brackets. But other than that,
so it hasn't done any of that yet. We still actually have to pass a tax bill. This was just a budget. This is just a budget bill. Basically, what this bill did was it defined some of the goals that each of the committees is going to have to come up with. For example, we're going to have to find $2.5 trillion worth of savings. ENC, the committee, has been charged with finding, $880 billion worth of savings. So, yeah, was this everything that I wanted? Absolutely not. But we are trying to figure out how to increase the debt ceiling because we don't have a choice. The reality is we're going to hit the debt ceiling, and you do one of two things: default on all the loans, which would basically lose America's dollar and as being the global currency, which would lead to an immediate, economic downturn for the country at best. Or two, we had to raise the debt ceiling. So we had to figure that out. We have to figure out how we are going to, for your point, happy that the Tax Cut and Jobs Act gets extended. We actually have to pass a bill. We have to pass that as part of one of our reconciliation packages to include the extension of the TCJA. So we're going to have to figure out how to pay for that. Now, the House is looking at finding and identifying $2.5 trillion worth of cuts. The Senate, on the other hand, we're having a little bit of a debate in the Senate. They are not as supportive. They are not as, I would say, hawkish fiscally, looking for those pay-fors. So, yes, it was we lost one Republican vote last night. I know that President Trump was on the phone with some folks who were wavering their support, but this at least puts us on the right track of cutting the spending and giving this administration the tools that it needs to continue moving forward. Because I don't know about you, but I love what they're doing.
Yeah, so why can't we just balance the budget?
We should be able to. I think I'm one of the only people in Congress who've actually passed 12 balanced budgets. I did that when I was mayor, not because I couldn't figure out how to spend more money, not because I didn't have staff and a city manager who was telling me we had to spend more money, or that I didn't have citizens who were saying, hey, these are the projects we want more money spent, but because by law, we had to. Right now, what we're trying to do is figure out how we can have a deficit neutral, which is basically balancing the budget.
Right.
How we can have a deficit neutral approach. But here's the problem. If we were deficit neutral, we still have over $36 trillion in debt. We're spending $1 trillion to pay for our debt servicing. And we're not paying that for services. There's no programs that we can cut. That's how much we're paying right now to cut down on our debt. So we have to figure out how to not only get deficit neutral, but also, start paying down the debt, because I think that's part of the worst thing that we have done in Congress is to allow that to continue.
Well, I find this incredibly frustrating because I have one party that wants to keep growing government. I have another party that wants to grow government just a little bit slower. And I've lost interest in supporting people who are going to grow government. I mean, how do you convince me to support Team Red in a time like this?
I don't know. I have been a big fan of getting rid of the regulations, which I think automatically reduces the size of government, because people, when you add more regulations, you add more, bodies in there to be able to market the regulations, to be able to enforce the regulations. So I think that's the first place you start. I have been really disappointed in GAO, because that's like their job, is to make sure that we don't have duplication, that we don't have waste, fraud, and abuse, and they really haven't done their job. So I have reintroduced on a couple of bills. GORAC is one of them, which talks about having third-party audits on our agencies. I think that should be automatic. I think, if we're not doing it internally, that we should have third parties that do that. Identify where there is, duplicative efforts. Identify where we're having massive amounts of waste, and then actually get rid of it. Other bills that I have introduced, 117th, 118th, and 119th Congress, have to do with regulations. Identifying across all the agencies what those regulations are, how much they cost, because they never do that. You notice that? They've had $1.3 trillion worth of increased regulations in the last 4 years under Biden. But has anybody actually seen that? So taking the regulations, how much they cost, and then on the flip side, making sure that the agencies have those budget negatives. So whatever the cost of a regulation is, they've got to find another regulation to get rid of. Another bill that I've recently introducing, and this is to kind of go along with what Trump's policies were, is that for every employee, he's saying that for every employee that in the federal government, for every employee that you hire, you have to lose 4 until you get to a certain number. And I've actually introduced legislation that would do that, to specifically get rid of the waste.
So at what point does the Republican Party, and I'm not blaming this all on you, Beth, but is there any time where y'all say, okay, we can't keep increasing the debt ceiling, we have to stop it now? 38 trillion, is that enough? Is 40 trillion the magic number? Like, how much debt are y'all willing to tolerate before you actually do put your foot down and say, I'm not voting for anything that doesn't balance the budget immediately?
Yeah, so I was one of the 34 that didn't vote for our continuing resolution last year. And I'll tell you, I got a lot of grief on that. Some people called my office and they said, if Trump's supportive of this and he asked you to jump, the only question you should ask is how high. I am absolutely supportive of President Trump's mission. I have supported it. I was in favor of cutting regulations in this whole DOGE effort before it was ever a thing, before President Trump ever walked down those escalators back in 2015. But I have continuously voted against the increases in spending. And I am a firm believer that we need to get back to pre-COVID numbers, which, if you remember, were already really high. So I cannot speak for all of my Republican brethren, but I can tell you I've introduced legislation that would shrink the size of government, and I have not voted for any of the increases in the spending that you've seen.
Doesn't the bill you voted for yesterday increase spending?
It increases the cap, but what we're looking at is having a deficit neutral. So again, it's identifying the $2.5 trillion of cuts to try to get down that government spend.
I find this really frustrating. You just voted for a bill that increased spending, and then you spent like four sentences.
No, I said it increases the debt limit. What we're trying to do is make it deficit neutral, so it's cutting the $2.5
Okay, but if you increase the debt limit and we're not deficit neutral, you're voting for a spending increase. The ball's going to keep rolling. The spending is going to increase, and you didn't vote no on it.
So this is not. I think you're confusing. Increasing the debt ceiling, we're already going to hit that. There's two realities. You either default. The interest rates that are growing on it, even if
no. See, I don't. That's a Hobson's choice. You have more options than either raise the debt limit or we default on the spending.
No, we're hitting it in June. We're hitting it in June. And
we don't have to if Congress would stop it. You're in the position to stop it. You go to conference meetings and you're in caucuses with people who are supposed to stop.
You recognize those checks have already been written for the debt. You're hitting it. Even if we didn't spend another dollar tomorrow, you're hitting it.
Make cuts. Make cuts. You can make cuts. You can stop.
What we're doing right now, which is exactly what we're doing right now.
So at what point are the checks are not already written?
That $2.5 trillion is exactly what we're aiming at. And I'm in these meetings with the speaker. I'm in these meetings with the whip, and I'm saying we can do better.
But this is what we were told the last time the Team Red was in power. Y'all, when Trump 1.0, there was continuing resolutions.
I haven't been here when Team Red has been in power.
And I'm trying to be fair and not put this all on you. You're right.
My second 2 years, we didn't have the White House, so we didn't have the Senate. So basically what we were pushing for in the House were messaging bills that we knew were going to go nowhere, which is why I am very optimistic right now that finally we may only have a one-member majority, one-vote majority. You can only afford to lose one vote, which is why, last night was back and forth. But I'll tell you, this is the first time that I've actually felt optimistic that there is a motivation. You've got the momentum behind you to be able to make these cuts. We had a DOGE press conference yesterday, and you've seen it. You've seen some of these town halls. You've seen some of these complaints by our Democrats and Ways and Means as well, where they're just going after Elon Musk. And I'm like, this is not going to be easy. This is no longer business as usual. People are complaining because he's going too fast. That's because they're so used to the government going so slow. It shouldn't be an excuse. If you had a power change that came into a private corporation and you had new leadership, it would not be a shock to the system that you're having people who are being laid off, that you are having departments that are being reorganized, and that you're having people who have to defend their jobs and explain what they do. You remember Office Space? What is it that you say you do here? That's just standard practice. But all of a sudden you apply it to government and people freak out like we're somehow demeaning federal employees because we're asking them to say what 5 things you did last week. This is a new day. This is we talk about this golden age. Look, we have a president who is willing to put his efforts and priorities right now on focusing on shrinking government. We and the Congress need to do the same. And that's why, again, I introduced 3 bills that are going hand in glove with what he is trying to accomplish.
See, this is why I'm a registered libertarian. I hear this, and it's not fair to blame this on you, Beth. You're right. You're new. You haven't been there for years, but this is what I've been hearing for 22 years in talk radio. Republicans keep coming in and explaining why they raise the debt limit, why they vote for deficits, why, we can't stop it now. The checks are already written. I'm tired of hearing it, and you're not going to win people like me over until someone just balance the budget. It's not impossible. It's not something that can't be done. The checks are already written from here to kingdom come.
I got a big fight fight with Kevin McCarthy about this because I said the same thing. I was like,
Okay.
I did it because, not because it was a law. It's like, well, it's not the law here. And I'm like, are we not lawmakers? Can we not do that? And his response to me was, yeah, can you bring me 218 votes? Well, I'll tell you, I'm trying.
All right. Thank you very much, Beth Van Duyne. I appreciate you being on the James Show. I'm super disappointed with what's going on, and I will be until we get a balanced budget. I refuse to believe it's impossible.
Now, let me know how what else I can do because I am all ears and I agree with you. 100%.
Propose a balanced budget. If no one else will propose one, I think Thomas Massey has one. You can sign on to his.
So right now I'm the RSC budget chair, and actually part of that I have signed on to a budget the last two on 117th and 118th that have been on the budget committee that will do just that. So I've already signed on to two budgets that would give us a balanced budget.
Thank you, Beth Van Duyne on the James Show. Got to run. All right, your thoughts, 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. Why do Republicans refuse to balance the budget? What's the point of voting for them if they just come out and vote for deficits and keep it rolling, raising the debt ceiling, another $2 trillion? That's why your groceries are going to go up. Both Team Blue and Team Red are selling you out. I'm James Parker. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Yeah, I'm getting some hot opinions over here. It's the James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. And listen, whenever I talk about Republicans disappointing me, I'm usually talking about capital R Republicans, and either in D.C. or Austin. They are both just screwing us so hard right now, and I'm tired of it. Look, I don't get mad at Democrats, big D or little d. I really don't. You guys love government. You want to grow government. You're open and honest about it. You're like, I think we should expand Medicare and Medicaid. I think we should expand Social Security. Fine. Those voters don't complain about the Democrat Party. They've done an excellent job growing government every day of your entire life. And so what we have now in the reality is one party that wants to grow government at breakneck speed, and one party that just wants to grow government with their pedal only halfway down on the gas. We don't have a party that wants to stop the growth of government or, my God, even reduce the size of government. So this is such a political farce that we're all participating in. And again, I am not bagging on you if you're a Republican, little r Republican. I just don't understand how you guys can stand to go out and vote for the capital R Republicans anymore. Even in the age of DOGE, even after the landslide, even after they shot at your presidential candidate, you're not holding your people to the fire. You're letting the people just go out there, and everyone but Thomas Massey can vote for an increase in the debt limit. $2.5 trillion more is going to be put on the backs of your kids and grandkids, and $2.5 trillion more is going to be printed and added to the money supply and make the cost of your groceries go up. How many more pay cuts do you have to have before you force the Republican Party to tap the brakes in either D.C. or Austin? How much can y'all put up with? It seems to be infinity. And again, I don't want to act like I'm all mad at Beth Van Duyne. Beth Van Duyne is just the avatar for Republicans that I've been talking to for 20 years who have constantly told me, well, we'll get them next time, James, or this puts us on the path, or we can't do anything about it now, or the checks are already written, or this has already been spent, or, this puts us on. No more excuses. How much is enough? At what point do you say, well, no matter what happens, we're not raising the debt ceiling? Let me squeeze in a call here, Garrett. Cameron, Fort Worth, you're on the James Show. What do you think?
Hey, James, just a quick thought on the checks already being in the mail. The checks have already been in the mail since 1937 when the Social Security Administration was created. We've got these unfunded liabilities that we're always going to be butting up against the debt ceiling because we can't stop that. Medicare and Medicaid, we've got to reform these, and there's no political will to reform them. So, yeah, we can be mad at the Republicans, but Republicans talked about reforming them in 2006 with privatization of Social Security, and they got their butts whipped. They're a scalded dog now.
And so what that means? Well, look, the media is going to whip them no matter what they do. The problem, I think, is us out here. We just send the incumbents back, even though they give us $2.5 trillion more in debt. The problem is like, I don't know if I'd blame the voters or not, because at no point in our lives, Cameron, have we ever gone to the ballot box and been able to vote for the limited government party, the party that wants to reduce the size of government. You've only gone to the ballot box and voted for the big government party or the even bigger government party. So I don't know if that's on us, the voters, or not, but it seems to be a real interesting facade how no matter who we go into the ballot box and vote for, we're going to get bigger government. And if you were an elite and like a dictatorial elite, and wanting to maintain some sort of class system. This is kind of the ruse you would put up there, this false choice between capital R and capital D. It doesn't matter what you choose. No matter what, you just get more debt, you just get more inflation, you get more government. That's not right, and that's not democracy. People are going to save our democracy. Well, we don't have one. 800-288-9227. Let's go check in with the border next on The James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Hey there, welcome to The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. Yeah, we have measles in Texas. It's the first big outbreak in a long time. First death in America in 10 years from the measles. And then you probably heard on our bottom of the hour news report, there's one here in our area. Now, it's not connected to the bigger outbreak that's happening out in West Texas, but we'll cover that in the next hour. I have Dr. Fahmy Farah coming up after the news break in about 15 minutes to talk about that. But, I have some different angles on that I really think you'll be interested in. I wanted to stop down in the DOGE discussion here. By the way, if you want to join the show, 800-288-9227. And Elon Musk was asked, why are you such a crusader for DOGE? What made you this passionate? You used to not be this political. You used to be all focused on PayPal and SpaceX and Tesla and your boring company. But here you are. It seems like your prime directive in life is to reduce the size of government. And a lot of this comes from just being a business owner. Business owners know exactly what I'm talking about when we talk about overregulation. You people, especially like home builders, you got to get the health code inspection, and then you got to get the building inspection, and then the fire inspection. You got to get all these pencil neck nerds to come out and tell you, well, the toilet's got to be 8 inches further away from the wall. It's like, well, how do I move a toilet main? I don't care. Well, that'll cost me $30,000. Well, you still have to do it, or you don't have my permission to open a handicap stall. So I've heard the frustration ad nauseum for business owners, especially you guys in construction. But Elon had a different situation. Whenever those giant SpaceX rockets go up, they come down and they're reusable. So sometimes he made this new thing where they can get caught by these big old mechanized arms when they're falling out of the sky. But the standard procedure is there's a giant barge, which is self-driving. There's not a human being on it, but it's just like this remote control autonomous barge goes out into the middle of the ocean, and the rocket lands on a barge in the ocean. And so with that, their overlap with using the ocean caused some regulation questions that the regulators hadn't had to deal with before. And you could tell they were just making it up as they go along. Listen to this.
SpaceX had to do the study to see if Starship would hit a shark. And I'm like, it's a big ocean, There's a lot of sharks. It's not impossible, but it's very unlikely. We said, okay, fine, we'll do the analysis, and then, well, can you give us the shark data? They're like, no, we can't give you the shark data. Well, like, okay, well, then we're in a bit of a quandary. How do we solve this this shark probability issue? And they said, well, we could give it to our Western division, but we don't trust them. And I'm like, am I in a comedy sketch here? So eventually, I think we got the data, and we could run the analysis to say, like, yeah, the sharks are going to be fine. But they wouldn't let us proceed with launch until we did this crazy shark data, and then we thought, okay, now we're done. And they said, but what about whales? I'm like, when you look at a picture of the Pacific, what percentage of the surface area of the Pacific do you see as whale? Because I look at a picture, I don't see any. It's like, where's a whale? And honestly, if the ship did hit a whale, it's like, honestly, that whale had it coming, because it's like the odds are so low. It's like Final Destination, the whale edition. It's like fate had it in for that whale, and so we have to do the whale analysis. And it's like, okay, yeah, the whales will be fine too, It goes on. And then there's like, well, what if the rocket goes underwater, then explodes, and then the whales have hearing damage? Like, this is real. This is actually, and we're like, look, if we could make a rocket go underwater and be a submarine, that would be like a feat of physics we could not accomplish, okay? This is not how it works. So anyway, just one like crazy thing after another, where so this is why I'm like really feeling the pain of the overregulation.
All right, that was Elon Musk on where he got his motivation to deregulate so bad from. That kind of spells it out for me. Coming up next, Dr. Fahmy Farah is going to talk about the measles outbreak in Texas. Are your kids at risk? Are you at risk? Find out next on The James Show. News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.